Hello and welcome to Media Academy Online, and welcome to our very first game jam. If you don't know what a game jam is, it's basically where you have a set amount of time and you have to create a game. And since I'm always been talking about film, I thought I'm going to build something, I'm going to make a game within a limited amount of time. And for this game jam, I'm going to create the original Pong, and I'm giving myself 1 hour to do it. And as I create this game, I'm going to explain to you exactly the methodology and the processes behind creating a game like this. So this isn't a tutorial. If it was a tutorial, it would be way too long. This is more about explaining the methodology behind it. And hopefully this way will make it a lot more accessible to people who might get a bit overwhelmed by the code and how that all works. And since I only have a limited amount of time, I'm going to use a Game Maker. If you don't know what Game Maker is, it's basically an engine where you can build games. But what I like about it is it's very fast and you can build games super quickly. So with that said, let's get straight into it. I've got 1 hour and let's see how I go. Okay, here we are, about to begin. Now, as you can see, I've just typed in Google for a 1 hour countdown. So here it is. So I'm going to start in Photoshop to start with. I'm going to create the graphics that I need, which is basically the two paddles and the ball. I'm going to create those and then we're ready to start coding. And so we'll begin now. Right, so I've created the two objects. We've got the paddle, which we only need one of them, because that'll just get duplicated for each of the different objects. And we've also got the ball. I just quite quickly created those in Photoshop. I've still got 58 minutes left. So with that done, with that created, let's continue on. So the first thing we need to think of is the paddles. I don't know if that's the exact term for them, but that's what I'm calling them anyway. The bars which you will operate, and they'll move up and down. Player 1 will have this bar and player 2 will have this bar, and you can control them. In my version, I'm just going to have Q and A and the up and down arrows to operate them depending on the character. So it's a game you would play on a computer with a friend locally who's next to you. So let's just look at one of these paddles and explain how it works. So we've got this paddle here that's moving up and down, as we can see. Well, we basically have to give it a variable. We have to give it certain digits depending on the state that it's in. We'll start off when it's not moving, like this. That is a variable number of 0. So we know whenever this isn't moving, the variable is set to 0. But what about when we move it? Well, when we press the up arrow and he moves upward, well, then that's going to be another variable state. Let's say that's 1. And so when it's going down, we have a variable of 2. Now we have to tell whenever we do something to change the state of this variable. So in game language, it goes something like this. If the up key is pressed, then this variable will be set to 1. If the down key is pressed, then the variable is set to 2. But what about when it's not pressed at all? Well, we basically want it to be set to 0 once we let go of any key. So we tell it that. If either of these keys are released, then we're going to set it back to its idle state of 0. I'm going to quickly pause it to show you exactly what I've done. I've created the first paddle. So at the moment, we can use the up and down arrows and they're going either direction. The one thing it doesn't do is stop when it hits the top. So that's the next thing to do. Let's cut to other me to explain how this works. So then what do we do when it hits the boundaries of the room that it's set inside? So in my game, it is constantly running an event, which is checking what this variable number is, and it's responding to that digit. For example, if it is set to 1, then it knows to go up. But what I do here, in the case of me wanting it to stop when you reach the top, is I add in a new if statement. And in this if statement, I'm going to constantly ask it, as long as the y of my object is higher than 0, or the top of the room, then you're free to move upward. Otherwise, don't do it. And it's the exact same for the bottom. As long as the y of the object plus the height of the object is a lower number than the bottom of the room, then you're free to move. Otherwise, don't move. And it's if statements like this which gives you all of the controls to put in limitations just like this. Now it's just a matter of duplicating that object and creating a second one, except in the code we'll just change up or down to Q or A. Then we're done. Now we've got two bars that operate on their own keys by their own user. Now it's a matter of creating our ball. Quickly pause it here. I've got 39 minutes left and I've basically created the ball. So I've also created a little bit of code, which means every time I hit space, the room will restart. And I also put a little bit of code to randomize the direction so that every time we start, we don't know which direction the ball is going to go. Now, obviously the ball is just going out of the room. I haven't coded all of the collisions yet, and that's the next step, is to do that. So let's code the collisions. And then it's just a matter of creating a bit of code, which can take a little bit of fiddling around with, but we basically have to create a code that will tell it to effectively bounce off these paddles. As you can see, it's working, so it's colliding on both of those objects, but as we can see, it still is going out of the top and bottom, so we need to fix that. So the next thing we need to do is tell it when it gets to the top or bottom to bounce. So how do we do this? So I'm just going to basically create a new object at the top and the bottom of the scene and basically tell it the same thing. If it hits these objects, you're going to bounce. So now the edges are working and we have it going up and down. So that's all good, that's working so far. Now it's just a matter of creating our point system and we're pretty much done. When it leaves the room in either of the left or the right, we want a point to be given to either of the players. Well, basically using more if statements. If you leave the room, then you need to work out whether you're on the left or right. So how do you do that? The easiest way is to create a division, a dividing point in the middle of the room. Here is the number. This is the midpoint on the x-axis of the room. If the x point of that ball is minus this number here, then you're going to give the point to the right. And if the x value is more than this point here, then the point's going to go to the left. Then it's just a matter of creating a little bit of code. So we're keeping track of the two players' points. They're basically two more variables. For instance, let's say the ball moved to the left, then we basically will give the point to the right. And now we're not quite out of the woods yet. There's one last thing we need to do, and it's basically pick a winner. So let's say this is best of 10. Then we basically have to write a little bit of code. And this little bit of code will go when the ball exits either of the ends. Basically, it's a code that will check. If the ball has exited the room, are any of these 2 points here up to 10 yet? Let's say the right was up to 10. Then it'll pick the winner as the right and we'll say right wins. If neither of them up to 10 yet, it won't do anything and it'll exit the event. I've finished with 15 minutes to go. Both of the paddles work and the point system is also working. So as we can see, it hits the paddles. Once it exits either of the sides, so if we let it exit on this one, we can see that point is given to the opposite person. If I wanted to, I could spend some more time, make it get harder as the time goes up, so it gets more challenging. I'd have it so the ball would go in a random direction, but avoid anything that's too vertical, so we're not waiting forever for it to bounce to get to either end, and things like that. Change the graphics, add in some music, and do things like that. But for 45 minutes, I think I've done pretty well. And so with that said, that is basically the reasoning and the methodology behind creating one of these games. If you like this kind of game jam idea that I've started, let me know and I'll be sure to do more of them and explain the processes and the methodology behind it and exactly how the game works and how the computer understands what I'm coding. So with that said, thanks for watching. Make sure you like, subscribe, ring that bell, be awesome, and I'll see you, yes, I'll see you in the next one. Thanks, and see you later.
Thanks for watching Mini Academy Online. If you'd like to explore more of our content, click on this or click on that. Like and subscribe, thumbs up, ring bells, do a dance, sing a song, drink a hot cup of tea or coffee, and I'll see you in the next one.